Her in-laws demanded humiliation, but she had a secret billionaire family waiting for revenge. Chapter 1. I never thought humiliation could sound like applause. Have you ever stood in a room full of people pretending to adore you while waiting for you to fall? That's what it felt like that night. Champagne glasses raised, laughter bouncing off marble walls, and me standing there in silk and pearls, realizing my marriage had become a stage for my own public execution. They wanted me to break. They needed me to. Because if I didn't, what would that say about them? My name is Arya, and this is the story of how I let them think I was nobody, until the day they learned exactly who I was. Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family, enjoy the story. To understand why that dinner party mattered, you need to know how I got there. Not just to that house with its crystal chandeliers and perfectly trimmed hedges, but to the moment I chose to walk away from everything I knew to become someone ordinary. I grew up wrapped in quiet luxury. My father owned half of a tech empire you've probably used today without knowing his name. That was intentional. He raised me with one rule. Power means nothing if you use it to crush people. My mother taught me grace, the kind that doesn't need an audience. They gave me everything except permission to flaunt it. When I turned 19, I told my father I wanted to earn my own way. I expected resistance. Instead, he handed me a suitcase and said something I'd carry forever. The world is yours, but remember who you are when they try to make you forget. So I left. No driver, no trust fund safety net, no last name that opened doors before I even knocked. I enrolled in college under my mother's maiden name, worked at a bookstore that smelled like old paper and coffee, and learned what it felt like to be invisible. That's where I met Noah. He wasn't supposed to matter. He was just a guy who spilled coffee on my favorite book and apologized like his life depended on it. He had this smile, the kind that made you feel like maybe the world wasn't as cold as you thought. He walked me home that day, then the next, then every day after that. For months, Noah made me feel seen. Not as Sebastian Lane's daughter, not as someone born into boardrooms and private jets, but as Arya, the girl who loved poetry and stayed up too late watching stars. When he proposed on a beach at sunset, I said yes without hesitation. I thought I'd found something real. Something that had nothing to do with money or influence or family names. I was wrong. The Whitlock family looked perfect from the outside. Magazine-ready mansion, charity galas every season, smiles that belonged on campaign posters. But perfection has a price, and I became the payment. Noah's mother, Vivian, had a way of smiling that felt like a warning. She'd compliment my dress while adjusting my collar. She'd praise my cooking while remaking the entire menu. Every word dripped with sweetness that tasted like poison. "You'll need to work on your posture, dear," she'd say during brunch. "The photographers will notice." I'd nod and smile, the way I'd learned to do growing up among people who wore masks professionally. But after the wedding, the masks came off, or maybe they just fit tighter. Vivian started assigning me duties. Plan the fundraiser. Host the dinner. Manage the seating chart. Smile wider. Stand straighter. Speak softer. Every gesture became a test I hadn't studied for. And every failure became a whisper that spread through their social circle like wildfire. "She's so unrefined," I heard Vivian tell her friends once. "Pretty, yes, but you can't buy class." I stood outside the door, holding a tray of tea I'd made myself, and felt something crack inside my chest. Noah changed too. Slowly at first, like erosion you don't notice until the cliff collapses. He started repeating his mother's words in quieter tones, as if they were his own thoughts. "Mom's just trying to help you fit in," he'd say when I came to him frustrated. "You need to be patient." Patient. As if dignity was something you earned through endurance. Tried. For months, I swallowed my pride and played the role they wrote for me. I became smaller, quieter, easier to mold. I thought if I loved him enough, if I tried hard enough, he'd remember the girl he fell for at the bookstore. But love doesn't survive when respect dies. The night everything changed started like all the others. Another dinner party. Another chance for the Whitlocks to show off their connections. Politicians, executives, local media. Everyone who mattered was there. I'd spent a week planning every detail. The wine pairings, the floral arrangements, the seating chart that kept rivals away from each other. Everything was perfect. Until Vivian stood up mid-dinner, champagne glass raised, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Let's have a little fun tonight. My darling daughter-in-law has such a mysterious background, doesn't she? Maybe she'll entertain us with her story." The room rippled with laughter. Froze. fork halfway to my mouth, smile plastered on my face, heart hammering so loud I thought everyone could hear it. Vivian continued, her voice dripping with false curiosity. I mean really, Arya, no one seems to know where you came from. You say your parents are gone but no records, no relatives. It's almost as if you made yourself up. More laughter. Nervous this time but laughter nonetheless. I looked at Noah. He was staring at his wine glass like it held the secrets of the universe. He wouldn't meet my eyes. For a moment the girl in me, the one who just wanted to belong, almost apologized, almost explained, almost begged them to understand. But then I heard my father's voice in my head. Remember who you are when they try to make you forget. So I smiled. Not the small, apologetic smile they expected. Real one. The kind that comes from knowing something they don't. Oh, Mrs. Whitlock, I said softly, my voice steady as stone. You're right. I've been meaning to tell you about my family. But you see, it's a bit complicated. They're very private people. Vivian's eyes gleamed with triumph. Private. Or non-existent. The room held its breath. I set down my fork slowly, deliberately. Let's just say they prefer to stay out of unnecessary drama. The silence lasted only a moment before Vivian laughed it off, clinking her glass. The party continued, conversations resumed, but something fundamental had shifted. I'd stopped pretending. That night, after everyone left and the house fell quiet, Noah cornered me in our bedroom. You embarrassed my mother, he said, voice tight with anger. In front of everyone. I stared at him. At this man I'd married, this person I thought I knew. She humiliated me first. She was joking. No, I said quietly. She was testing me. And I finally passed. We fought until our voices went hoarse. He accused me of being ungrateful, of not understanding his family's expectations. I asked him when he'd stopped being on my side. He didn't have an answer. That night, I lay awake beside him, listening to him breathe in the darkness. His back was turned to me, a wall I couldn't climb anymore. And I realized something that should have broken my heart but instead set me free. I was done begging for respect from people who'd already decided I wasn't worth it. 2 weeks later, an envelope arrived. Cream-colored paper, elegant cursive handwriting that made my throat tighten with recognition. Your family requests your presence in San Francisco. It's time. If only they knew whose daughter they tried to break. Chapter 2. Before the humiliation, before the masks and the whispers, there was coffee and laughter. I need you to understand something. Noah wasn't always the man who turned his back while his mother tore me apart. Once upon a time, he was the reason I believed in simple magic. It was a Tuesday morning at the bookstore where I worked. I was restocking the poetry section, lost in my own world, when someone crashed into the ladder I was standing on. Books went flying. Coffee went everywhere. And my favorite copy of Pablo Neruda's sonnets landed in a brown puddle on the floor. Oh God, I'm so sorry, he said, panic written all over his face. I wasn't watching where I was. Please tell me that wasn't your coffee. I climbed down, staring at the ruined book. It was yours, actually. You just baptized my favorite poet. He looked horrified. Then I laughed, and something in his expression shifted from panic to relief to something softer. I'm Noah, he said, extending his hand. Professional disaster, apparently. Arya, I replied. Professional book lover. He bought me a new copy of the book. Then he offered to buy me coffee to make up for the one he'd spilled. I said yes, mostly because his smile was the kind that made you want to say yes to everything. We sat in that coffee shop for 3 hours. He told me about growing up in California, about his family's expectations and his dream of doing something that mattered beyond just making money. I told him about loving old poetry and wanting to build something meaningful with my own hands. I didn't mention the trust fund, or the penthouse in San Francisco, or the father whose name appeared in financial magazines. For the first time in my life, someone saw me without seeing my last name first. It felt like breathing clean air after years in a smoke-filled room. He walked me home that day. Then the next day, he showed up at the bookstore with another coffee, this time safely away from any books, and asked if I wanted to take a walk. We walked for miles, talking about everything and nothing. He made me laugh in ways I'd forgotten I could. Not polite laughter at charity dinners, but real laughter that came from somewhere deep in my chest. If you've ever fallen for someone's laugh before their face, drop a comment. Because that's what happened to me. Days turned into weeks. Noah became part of my routine. Morning coffee before my shift. Long walks after closing time. Late-night conversations on my tiny apartment balcony. Watching stars appear one by one. He'd point at constellations and make up completely wrong names for them. "That one's the Great Spatula," he'd say with complete confidence. "That's Orion's belt," I'd correct him. "You say tomato, I say Great Spatula." I'd shove him playfully, and he'd catch my hand and hold it, and suddenly the stars didn't matter anymore. There was one night in particular I'll never forget. We were sitting on that balcony, and he turned to me with this serious expression. "Can I tell you something?" he asked. "Always. I've dated a lot of women who wanted me for what I could give them. My family name, the connections, the lifestyle." He paused. "But you don't care about any of that, do you?" I shook my head, throat tight with emotion. "I care about the guy who makes up constellation names and apologizes to books." He kissed me then. Soft and careful, like I was something precious he was afraid to break. For 6 months we built something beautiful. He'd surprise me with flowers from the farmer's market. I'd leave poetry verses on sticky notes in his apartment. We'd cook terrible dinners together and laugh when the smoke alarm went off. We'd dance in his living room to music only we could hear. He met my life. The small apartment, the bookstore paychecks, the simple existence I'd chosen. And he never once made me feel like it wasn't enough. I thought I'd found someone who loved me for me. Someone who didn't need me to be anyone other than exactly who I was. Looking back now, I wonder if he ever really knew who that was. The proposal came on a beach at sunset. Cliché, I know, but it was perfect in its simplicity. No photographers, no audience. Just us and the ocean, and a ring that wasn't the biggest I'd ever seen but felt like the most honest. "Marry me," he said, sand on his knees, hope in his eyes. "Not because you're supposed to, not because anyone expects it, but because I can't imagine my life without you in it." I said yes before he finished the sentence. We were engaged for 4 months. During that time little things started to change. He'd mention his mother's opinions more often. He'd suggest I dress differently for family dinners. He'd get quiet when I talked about keeping my job at the bookstore after the wedding. But I told myself it was just wedding stress. That once we were married, once the pressure of planning was over, we'd go back to being us. I was so naive. The wedding was everything his family wanted. Vineyard ceremony, 500 guests, designer dress that cost more than my yearly salary. My father offered to attend, to walk me down the aisle, but I declined. I thought I was protecting my simple life, keeping my two worlds separate. Really, I was walking into a trap without realizing the door was closing behind me. Noah was sweet on our honeymoon. Attentive, romantic, the man I'd fallen for. But the moment we returned to California, to his family's mansion where we'd be living until we got on our feet, everything shifted. He started spending more time with his mother, taking her calls at dinner, asking her opinion on decisions we should have made together. And I started to feel less like a wife and more like a project they were both determined to fix. One night, about 3 weeks after the wedding, I tried to talk to him about it. We were in bed, the space between us feeling wider than it actually was. "Noah," I said softly, "do you ever miss how things were before all this?" He didn't turn to face me. "What do you mean?" "I mean us. The bookstore. The balcony. Just being together without what, Aria? Without my family. Without responsibility." His tone was sharper than I'd ever heard it. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "That's not what I meant. My mother's just trying to help you adjust. This is a different world, and you need to learn how to navigate it." There it was. The first time he said I needed to change. The first time he implied I wasn't enough as I was. I turned away from him, staring at the ceiling in the darkness. "I shouldn't have to change to be loved by you." He didn't respond. And in that silence, I heard everything he couldn't say. But I loved him. So I stayed. I told myself this was just an adjustment period. That marriages took work. That love meant compromise. I didn't realize yet that compromise should never mean losing yourself completely. And that's how I walked straight into the Whitlock world, wearing white and blind to what was coming. Chapter 3. The Whitlock mansion looked like something out of a magazine. All marble floors and floor-to-ceiling windows that made you feel exposed even when you were alone. I should have seen it as a warning. Homes that beautiful usually have ugly secrets hiding in the corners. My first morning there, I woke up to find Vivian in my bedroom, reorganizing my closet. "Good morning, darling," she said without looking up. "I've taken the liberty of sorting through your wardrobe. Some of these pieces are, well, they're lovely for a bookstore, but you're a Whitlock now. We have standards." I stood there in my pajamas, watching her box up clothes I'd chosen, clothes that felt like me, and replace them with outfits that looked like uniforms. "I appreciate the thought," I said carefully, "but I'm comfortable with what I have." She smiled that tight smile of hers. "Comfort isn't the point, dear. Presentation is." That was day 1.
By day 7, I had a list of rules I hadn't asked for. How to sit at dinner. Which topics were appropriate for conversation. How to laugh. Apparently mine was too loud for formal events. I needed to practice a more refined version. I tried to talk to Noah about it, but he was always busy. Business meetings with his father. Golf with investors. Lunches with his mother where they discussed family matters. I wasn't invited to join. "You're being sensitive," he said when I finally cornered him. "Mom's just passionate about maintaining our reputation. It's not personal." But it felt personal every time she corrected my posture in front of guests. Every time she redid the table settings I'd arranged. Every time she introduced me as Noah's wife, without using my name. The worst part. I started to shrink. I'd catch myself monitoring my laugh, straightening my spine without thinking, choosing silence over saying something that might be wrong. I was disappearing piece by piece, and nobody seemed to notice. Except maybe Thomas, the family's driver. He was an older man, quiet and observant. One day, as he drove me to a charity luncheon, he caught my eye in the rearview mirror. "Mrs. Whitlock, the younger Mrs. Whitlock, can I say something?" "Please," I said, grateful for any conversation that didn't feel scripted. "I've worked for this family for 20 years. I've seen a lot of people try to fit into their world." He paused. "The ones who lose themselves never get themselves back." His words hit me like ice water. But before I could respond, we'd arrived at the venue, and I had to put on my smile and play my part. The charity luncheons were the worst. All these women with their perfect hair and their sharp eyes, measuring me up like I was a stock they were deciding whether to invest in. Vivian introduced me to her circle with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "This is Arya, Noah's wife. We're still teaching her the ropes." They'd laugh politely, and I'd feel about 2 inches tall. One woman, Patricia something or other, leaned in close during the salad course. "So Arya, what does your family do?" The table went quiet. This was the question they all wanted answered. The one Vivian had probably been asking since Noah first brought me home. "They're in business," I said simply. "What kind of business?" "Technology." "How interesting. Would we know the company?" If you've ever felt like you're being interrogated while people pretend to be friendly, hit that like button, because that's exactly what this was. "Probably not," I said, keeping my voice light. "They prefer to stay private." Patricia exchanged a glance with Vivian. I could practically hear their thoughts. No family name we recognize. No connections worth mentioning. Just a pretty face with no pedigree. I excused myself to the bathroom and stood in front of the mirror, staring at a woman I barely recognized. Designer dress, perfect makeup, hair styled by someone else's hands. I looked like a Whitlock. I didn't look like Arya anymore. That night, I tried one more time to reach Noah. He was in his office, going over contracts, and I knocked softly before entering. "Can we talk?" "Yes." He didn't look up from his papers. "I'm busy, Arya." "I know, but this is important. I feel like I'm losing myself here. Your mother, the constant criticism, the way everyone looks at me like I'm not good enough. Maybe if you tried harder to fit in, they wouldn't look at you that way." The words hung in the air between us like poison. I stepped back, physically recoiling. "Do you hear yourself right now?" He finally looked up, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Not cruelty exactly, but indifference. Like I was a problem he was too tired to solve. "I hear someone who's making this harder than it needs to be. My mother is trying to help you. My family is trying to accept you. But you keep resisting." "I'm resisting being erased," I whispered. "You're being dramatic." I left his office before he could see me cry. I wouldn't give him that satisfaction. I wouldn't give any of them that satisfaction. Instead, I went to the garden, the one place on the property that felt almost peaceful, and sat on a stone bench under the stars. The same stars Noah and I used to watch together, back when he thought my laugh was perfect just as it was. I pulled out my phone and stared at my father's contact information. Call. That's all it would take. One call and I could leave all of this behind. But pride stopped me. Or maybe stubbornness. I told my father I wanted to make my own way, build my own life. Running home after a few months of marriage felt like failure. So I stayed. I told myself I could endure this. That love meant fighting for your marriage, even when your marriage wasn't fighting for you. The weeks blurred together. More dinners, more corrections, more nights sleeping beside a man who felt like a stranger. Noah and I barely talked anymore except about logistics. What time we needed to leave for events, whose birthday party we were attending, whether I'd remembered to send the thank you notes Vivian had drafted for me. Romance died slowly in that house. Not with a bang but with 1,000 tiny cuts. His hand no longer reaching for mine. His kiss becoming perfunctory, obligatory. The way he'd scroll through his phone while I tried to tell him about my day. I started taking long walks, just to feel something other than trapped. I'd wander through neighborhoods where people lived in normal houses and probably had normal problems, and I'd wonder what I'd traded my freedom for. One afternoon I passed a bookstore. Not the one I'd worked at, that was across town, but similar. Cozy, cluttered, smelling like possibility. I went inside and found myself in the poetry section, running my fingers along spines until I found Neruda. I opened to a random page and read, "I want to do with you what spring does with the cherry trees." Tears blurred the words. I'd forgotten what it felt like to be someone's spring instead of their winter project. "Beautiful, isn't it?" a voice said beside me. I looked up to find an older woman, the bookstore owner probably, smiling gently. "It is," I managed. "You look like you need this book," she said. "Or maybe just a reminder that beautiful things still exist." I bought the book. Paid cash so there'd be no credit card statement for Vivian to question. Hid it in my nightstand drawer like contraband. That night, Noah worked late. Again. I lay in our enormous bed, reading poetry by lamplight, and let myself remember who I used to be. But remembering hurt worse than forgetting. Because I couldn't see a way back to her anymore. The dinner party was scheduled for 3 weeks later. Vivian had been planning it for months. Her crown jewel event, the one where all the right people would gather to see how well the Whitlock family maintained its position. And I was supposed to be proof of their continued excellence. The perfect daughter-in-law who'd been shaped and molded into something worthy of their name. I didn't know then that every smile at that table was a rehearsal for my humiliation. Chapter 4. Living in that house felt like being slowly buried alive, each day adding another layer of dirt until you forgot what breathing freely felt like. 3 months into my marriage, Vivian hired someone named Claire to help me refine my social skills. That's what she called it. What she meant was, "You're embarrassing us, and we're bringing in a professional to fix you." Claire was tall, elegant, and carried a clipboard like a weapon. "Posture," she'd say, tapping my spine with a ruler. A Whitlock woman never slouches. I'd straighten up, feeling like a puppet with freshly tightened strings. We practiced walking across rooms with books on my head. We rehearsed conversation topics deemed acceptable for formal events. We drilled the proper way to hold a wine glass, how long to maintain eye contact, the exact angle to tilt my head when listening to someone important. "You're doing well," Claire said one day, which was probably the closest thing to a compliment I'd get. "You're learning." As if being myself required instruction. The irony was suffocating. I'd grown up attending state dinners, charity galas, events where presidents and CEOs mingled like old friends. I'd learned diplomacy and grace from people who wielded influence across continents. But I couldn't tell anyone that. So I stood there while Claire taught me things my mother had taught me before I could read, and I nodded like it was all new information. Noah stopped coming to bed at the same time I did. He'd stay up late in his office, claiming work was demanding. But I'd walk past and see him scrolling through his phone, laughing at messages I wasn't part of anymore. Chapter 5. The night of the party arrived with California sunshine and an undercurrent of dread I couldn't shake. I woke up early before Noah, before the house started buzzing with caterers and florists and all the people Vivian hired to make everything perfect. I stood at the bedroom window, watching the sun climb over the manicured gardens, and thought about running. Just getting in a car and driving until the gas ran out. Disappearing into a life where nobody knew my name or cared about my posture. But I stayed, because running felt like letting them win. By noon, the mansion had transformed into something from a magazine spread. White flowers everywhere. Roses, lilies, orchids arranged in impossible patterns. Tables draped in silk, crystal glasses that caught the light like diamonds. A string quartet tuning instruments in the corner. Vivian moved through it all like a general inspecting troops, adjusting flower arrangements by millimeters, repositioning candles, her face a mask of focused intensity. "Aria," she called when she spotted me. "Why aren't you getting ready yet? The party doesn't start for 6 hours." "Exactly. You need time. Hair, makeup, nails. Claire has the schedule." Course she did. I spent the afternoon being transformed. Hair twisted into an elegant updo that pulled at my scalp. Makeup applied by someone who treated my face like a canvas they were contractually obligated to perfect. Nails painted a color Vivian had specifically selected to match my dress. The woman in the mirror looked flawless. She looked exactly like what a Whitlock wife should look like. She looked nothing like me. Beautiful, Claire declared when we finished. You'll photograph wonderfully. Because that's what mattered. How I'd look in the photos that would circulate through social media and society pages. Evidence of the Whitlock family's continued relevance. Noah knocked on my door as I was putting on my dress. Can I come in? It's your house. He entered, already dressed in his tuxedo, looking like he'd stepped out of an advertisement for expensive watches. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes when he saw me. You look stunning, he said. That's the point, right? The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. Arya, I know you're upset about our fight, but tonight's important, I finished. I know. Your mother made that very clear. He crossed the room, reaching for my hand. I let him take it but felt nothing. No flutter, no warmth. Just cold awareness that this touch was as choreographed as everything else tonight. After this is over, we'll talk, he said. Really talk. About us, about everything. I wanted to believe him. Part of me, the part that remembered coffee spills and constellation names, desperately wanted to believe him. But promises are cheap when you've watched someone break them in slow motion for 3 months. Okay, I said, because what else was there to say? He kissed my forehead, a gesture that felt more like marking territory than affection, and left to greet early arrivals. I stood there alone, staring at my reflection, and thought about my father. About his quiet strength. His deliberate humility. About how he'd built an empire without crushing anyone to do it. Remember who you are when they try to make you forget. I took a breath, straightened my spine. Not because Claire had trained me to, but because Lane women didn't break, and headed downstairs. The party had already started by the time I descended the grand staircase. 75 guests in designer clothes, sipping champagne, laughing at jokes that probably weren't funny. I could see Noah across the room, deep in conversation with Senator Morrison. Vivian held court near the fireplace, surrounded by her inner circle. Nobody noticed me arrive. I was already present in spirit. The decorations I'd been forced to approve, the menu I'd been consulted on as a formality, the carefully curated guest list where I knew maybe 5 people. I grabbed a champagne flute from a passing waiter and found a corner where I could observe without participating. A survival skill I'd perfected over the past months. Mrs. Whitlock, a voice said beside me. Patricia, from the charity luncheon. You look lovely. Thank you. Such a wonderful party. Vivian outdid herself. Not you and Vivian, just Vivian. Because everyone knew who really ran this show. She certainly did, I agreed, taking a sip of champagne that tasted expensive and hollow. I was telling the girls, it must be so exciting being part of such a prominent family. Her eyes gleamed with barely concealed curiosity. Especially coming from such humble beginnings. There it was. The polite way of saying, tell us where you really came from so we can judge you properly. Exciting is one word for it, I said, keeping my smile in place. She waited for more. When I didn't offer it, her smile tightened. Well, you're certainly lucky Noah saw potential in you. Potential. Like I was an investment that might pay off eventually. If you've ever wanted to throw champagne in someone's face but smiled instead, you understand what I was feeling right then. Dinner was announced. We filed into the dining room where Vivian had arranged everyone according to some complex social mathematics I didn't understand. I was seated between a banker who spent the first course talking about interest rates and a councilman who spent the second course explaining local politics like I was mentally slow. Noah was at the far end of the table, too far for conversation. He caught my eye once and smiled, an apology in it maybe, or just social obligation. The food was excellent. I barely tasted it. Conversation flowed around me. Business deals, political gossip, vacation homes, private schools for children who didn't exist yet. I nodded when appropriate, laughed when expected, played my part with mechanical precision. And then Vivian stood up. She was 5 courses into an 8-course meal, the perfect moment for a toast when everyone was relaxed but not drunk, attentive but not scrutinizing. I want to thank you all for being here tonight, she began, glass raised, smile radiant. It means so much to have such wonderful friends and colleagues gathered in our home. Polite applause. Agreeable murmurs. And I especially want to acknowledge someone special. My new daughter-in-law, Arya. My stomach dropped. This wasn't on the schedule. Vivian never deviated from the schedule. Stand up, darling, she encouraged, gesturing at me with her champagne flute. I stood slowly, every eye in the room turning to me like spotlights. Let's have a little fun tonight, Vivian continued, her voice sweet as poisoned honey. My darling daughter-in-law has such a mysterious background, doesn't she? Maybe she'll entertain us with her story. Nervous laughter rippled through the guests. The kind of laughter that smells blood in the water. I felt my heart hammering against my ribs. Felt the weight of 75 pairs of eyes measuring, judging, waiting for me to crumble. I mean really, Arya, Vivian said, and her voice carried across the silent room. No one seems to know where you came from. You say your parents are gone, but no records, no relatives. She paused, letting the implication hang. It's almost as if you made yourself up. The laughter grew louder. Not hostile exactly, but not kind either. The laughter of people watching someone else be humiliated and feeling grateful it wasn't them. I looked at Noah. He was staring at his wine glass like it contained the mysteries of the universe. Jaw tight, refusing to meet my eyes. He wasn't going to save me. He'd never been going to save me. For a heartbeat, I felt the old me, the girl who just wanted to be loved, almost apologize, almost explain, almost beg them to understand I was good enough, I was worthy, I deserved to be here. But then something shifted. A memory surfaced like a life raft in dark water. My father, the day I left home, handing me that suitcase. The world is yours, but remember who you are when they try to make you forget. And suddenly I remembered. I wasn't some nobody from nowhere who'd gotten lucky enough to marry into their world. I was Sebastian Lane's daughter. I came from a family whose wealth made theirs look like pocket change. I'd attended dinners with people who shaped global policy. I'd learned grace and strength from a woman who moved nations with a phone call. I didn't need their approval. I never had. Smiled then. Not the practiced smile Claire had taught me. Not the careful, measured expression of a woman trying to fit in. A real smile, the kind that comes from knowing something they don't. "Oh, Mrs. Whitlock," I said, my voice cutting through the lingering laughter with quiet precision. "You're right. I've been meaning to tell you about my family." The room went completely silent. "But you see, it's a bit complicated." Paused, letting them lean in. "They're very private people." Vivian's eyes gleamed with triumph. She thought she had me cornered. Private. Or non-existent. The question landed exactly how she intended. A killing blow delivered with a smile. More laughter erupted around the table. I saw Patricia lean toward her neighbor, whispering something behind her hand. The banker beside me shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I took a slow sip of my champagne, letting the moment stretch. When I set the glass down, my hand was steady. "Let's just say," I began, my voice calm as still water, "they prefer to stay out of unnecessary drama." The laughter faltered. Something in my tone had shifted the air in the room. Vivian's smile tightened at the edges. She sensed it too, that she hadn't landed the knockout punch she'd expected. That I wasn't crumbling the way I was supposed to. "How convenient," she said, trying to reclaim control. "Privacy as an excuse for what, Mrs. Whitlock?" I interrupted gently. "For not performing my family history like a circus act for your guests." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Noah finally looked up, his face pale. He knew that tone. He'd heard it once months ago, when I'd told him I wanted to earn my own way in the world. It was the voice of someone who'd stopped pretending. Vivian recovered quickly, years of social warfare giving her reflexes I was just discovering. "Of course not, darling. We're all just curious about the woman who captured our Noah's heart. Surely you can understand that." "I understand perfectly," I said. "You want to know if I'm good enough for your son." The guests shifted uncomfortably. This was too honest, too raw for their polished world of careful words and hidden meanings. "And the answer is," I paused, meeting Vivian's eyes directly, "I don't actually need you to decide that." If someone had dropped a pin, it would have sounded like thunder. "Arya," Noah said, voice tight with warning. But I was done being warned. Done being corrected. Done shrinking myself to fit into their impossibly small box. "I've spent 3 months trying to become whatever you wanted me to be," I continued, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "I've taken your etiquette lessons, worn your approved clothes, smiled at your friends while they dissected me like a biology project." I looked around the table at all those frozen faces. "I've been patient. I've been polite. I've been everything except myself." "This is hardly the time," Vivian started. "When would be the time?" "Yes. After another charity luncheon where your friends treat me like hired help. After another dinner where Noah takes your side over mine. When exactly is the appropriate moment to say I'm done performing for your approval? The silence was deafening. Noah stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. Arya, we need to talk. Now. No, I said simply. We don't. His face flushed red. You're embarrassing yourself. You're embarrassing all of us. Am I? I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw a stranger wearing my husband's face. Or am I finally being honest about what this marriage has become? You're being dramatic, he said, voice sharp. Just like always. Just like always. As if my feelings had always been an inconvenience. As if I'd always been too much, too difficult, too unwilling to disappear completely. You're right, I said quietly. I am dramatic. I laugh too loud. Care too much. I refuse to pretend everything's fine when it's not. I stood, smoothing my designer dress, the one Vivian had chosen, the one that made me look like a perfect Whitlock wife. And I'm finally remembering that those things aren't flaws. Vivian's composure cracked, just slightly. Sit down. You're making a scene. A scene. I laughed, and it was my real laugh, the one Claire had tried to train out of me. You stood up in front of 75 people and tried to humiliate me. And I'm the one making a scene? I was teasing. You were testing, I corrected. To see how much I'd take. How far you could push before I broke. I looked around at all those watching faces. Politicians, businesspeople, socialites who'd probably dine out on this story for months. Well, congratulations. You found my limit. I picked up my champagne glass, held it up in a mock toast. Thank you all for coming tonight. The food was excellent, the company was illuminating, and the entertainment, I glanced at Vivian, was exactly what I needed. Arya, don't you dare. Noah started. What? Leave. Walk away from this beautiful life you've all worked so hard to force me into. I set down my glass with deliberate care. Don't worry. I wouldn't dream of leaving before dessert. That would be rude. I sat back down, spine straight, chin high, and picked up my fork like nothing had happened. The guests stared at me like I'd grown a second head. Vivian looked like she'd swallowed glass. Noah stood frozen, caught between his mother's rage and his wife's rebellion, unsure which fire to put out first. And me. For the first time in 3 months I felt like I could breathe. The rest of dinner passed in excruciating silence. Dessert was served. Some elaborate chocolate creation that probably cost more than most people's weekly groceries, but nobody seemed to taste it. Conversation happened in whispers, careful glances shooting between me, Noah, and Vivian like we were unexploded bombs. I ate my dessert slowly, savoring each bite. Not because it was good, but because every second of my calm was torture for them. When the last guest finally left, farewells more rushed than usual, everyone eager to escape the tension, Noah cornered me in the hallway. What the hell was that? He hissed. That was honesty, I said. You should try it sometime. You humiliated my mother. In front of everyone who matters. She humiliated me first. Or did you miss that part while you were studying your wine glass? Chapter 6. The morning after the disaster came with silence that felt like a threat. I woke up in the guest room with sunlight cutting through curtains I hadn't closed, still wearing the hotel robe, my designer dress hanging in the closet like evidence of a crime I'd committed. For a moment I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything. Vivian's cruel toast. Laughter. Noah's cowardice. My own voice, finally finding its edge after months of being dulled. Then I heard it, voices downstairs. Angry voices. I crept to the door, pressing my ear against the wood. Noah and Vivian, going at it in the foyer. You pushed her too far, Noah was saying, and I almost laughed. Almost. Because now he wanted to defend me. After it was over. I was helping her understand her place. Vivian shot back. She's been resistant from the beginning. Someone needed to humiliate her in front of 75 people. That was your solution. Don't you dare blame me for her lack of composure. That girl has no breeding, no grace, no. She had plenty of grace until you spent 3 months tearing her apart. I stepped back from the door, heart pounding. This wasn't defense. This was too late. Way too late. I showered in the guest bathroom, letting hot water wash away the previous night's makeup residue. Then I put on the simplest clothes I could find in my wardrobe. Jeans and a sweater that felt like armor against whatever came next. When I finally went downstairs, the house was quiet. Noah sat in the dining room, coffee going cold in front of him, looking like he hadn't slept. "Arya," he said when he saw me. "We need to talk." "Now you want to talk." He flinched. "I know I should have defended you last night. You let your mother destroy me in front of everyone we know," I said, my voice eerily calm. "And you sat there like a statue." I was in shock. I didn't know what to. "You knew exactly what to do, Noah. You just chose not to do it." He stood reaching for me. I stepped back. "Don't," I said quietly. "Don't touch me like we're okay. We're not okay. We haven't been okay for months." "Then let's fix it," he said, desperation creeping into his voice. "We can go to counseling, we can move out of this house, we can." "We can what?" "Pretend your mother didn't reveal exactly what she thinks of me. Pretend you didn't choose her over me every single time it mattered. That's not fair." "Fair?" I laughed, bitter and sharp. "You want to talk about fair? I gave up everything to be with you. I left my family, my life, everything I knew because I thought you loved me for who I was. Instead, you spent 3 months trying to turn me into someone else. I never asked you to change. You didn't have to ask. You just agreed every time your mother did it for you." The silence between us felt like a chasm. On one side, the man I'd married. On the other, the woman I'd forgotten I was. "I can't do this anymore," I said finally. His face went pale. "What does that mean?" "It means I'm tired. I'm tired of fighting for respect in my own marriage. I'm tired of being treated like a project instead of a partner. I'm tired of feeling like I'm drowning in a life that's supposed to be mine." "Arya, please." "I need space," I interrupted. "Real space. Not a guest room down the hall. I need to think without your mother's voice in my head. Without you looking at me like I'm a problem you need to solve." "Where will you go?" "Good question." I'd isolated myself so completely that I didn't have friends nearby anymore. Didn't have my own apartment. Didn't have anything except the prison I'd walked into willingly. "I'll figure it out," I said, heading for the stairs. "Don't leave like this," Noah called after me. "At least wait until we can talk properly until." I turned to face him from the landing. "I waited last night. I waited while your mother humiliated me. I waited while you said nothing. I'm done waiting for you to choose me." Packed a bag in silence. Not the designer clothes Vivian had bought me. Just my old things, the pieces of myself I'd hidden in the back of the closet. My worn jeans. My favorite sweaters. The book of poetry I'd kept like contraband. Noah stood in the doorway watching. "This is really happening." "Yes. Because of one bad night." I zipped the bag and turned to face him. "Because of 100 bad nights that all led to the same conclusion. You don't love me enough to fight for me." "I do love you." "Then you have a terrible way of showing it." I walked past him, bag over my shoulder, and descended those grand stairs one last time. Vivian was nowhere to be seen, probably hiding in her wing, waiting for the dust to settle so she could claim victory. If you've ever had to walk away from someone you still loved, hit that subscribe button, because that's the hardest kind of leaving. I made it to the front door before Noah caught up with me one more time. "Where are you going?" he asked, voice breaking. "Anywhere that's not here." "Will you come back?" I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the boy who'd spilled coffee on my book a lifetime ago. The one who'd made me believe in simple magic and honest love. He was still in there somewhere, buried under his mother's expectations and his family's demands. But I couldn't excavate him anymore. I didn't have the strength. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Maybe that's something you should have worried about 3 months ago." I walked out into California sunshine that felt like freedom. Got into my car, the one thing I'd kept from my old life, and drove. I didn't know where I was going. Didn't care. Just needed distance between me and that house and that life and that version of myself who'd been disappearing piece by piece. I drove for an hour before I had to pull over. Hands shaking too hard to grip the steering wheel. Parked in some random coffee shop lot and just sat there, breathing, feeling everything I'd been holding back for months. Tears came then. Not quiet, polite tears. Ugly, gasping sobs that shook my whole body. Grief for the marriage I'd thought I had. Anger at the people who'd tried to break me. Relief that I'd finally broken free instead. I cried until I had nothing left. Then I pulled out my phone. My father's contact stared back at me. Call. That's all it would take. But the email notification caught my eye first. An unread message from an address I didn't recognize, sent 2 weeks ago. Subject line: "It's time." I opened it with trembling fingers. "Arya, your father and I know what's been happening. We've remained silent because you asked us to, because you wanted to build your own life. But enough is enough. When you're ready to come home, we're here. We've always been here. The penthouse in San Francisco is yours whenever you need it. You don't have to fight alone anymore. All our love, Mom. The email was dated the day after one of Vivian's worst charity luncheons. The one where Patricia had asked about my family in front of everyone, and I deflected with practiced ease. They'd known. All this time, they'd known I was suffering, and they'd respected my independence enough to let me figure it out myself. Until they couldn't anymore. I stared at that email, reading it over and over, feeling something crack open in my chest. Not breaking, opening. Like a door I'd kept locked because I was too proud to admit I needed help. My fingers moved before my brain caught up. I typed a simple response. I'm ready. I'm coming home. I sent it before I could second-guess myself. Before pride could stop me again. The response came within minutes. Just an address and 3 words. We're waiting, sweetheart. I put the car in drive and pointed it north toward San Francisco, toward the family I'd left behind to prove I could make it on my own. I'd proven it, all right. I'd proven I could survive. But surviving wasn't the same as living. And I was finally ready to remember what living felt like. The drive took 4 hours. 4 hours of California coastline and setting sun and radio songs that sounded like hope. I didn't think about Noah or Vivian or the life I was leaving behind. Just focused on the road, on moving forward, on every mile putting distance between who I'd been and who I was becoming again.
When I finally pulled up to the building in San Francisco, sleek glass and steel reaching toward the sky, my hands were steady. The doorman recognized me immediately. Mississippi Lane, he said with a warm smile. Welcome home. Mississippi Lane. Not Mrs. Whitlock. Just Aria Lane, daughter of Sebastian and Catherine, woman in her own right. I rode the elevator to the penthouse, watching the city shrink beneath me with every floor. When the doors opened, my mother was there. She didn't say anything, just opened her arms. And I fell into them like I was 5 years old again, like I hadn't spent 5 years pretending to be independent, like coming home was the most natural thing in the world. I'm sorry, I sobbed into her shoulder. I'm so sorry. Shoo, she whispered, stroking my hair. You have nothing to apologize for. I should have called sooner. Should have asked for help. Should have. You did exactly what you needed to do, she said firmly, pulling back to look at me. You tried. You gave it everything you had. And when it became too much, you knew when to walk away. That's not weakness, sweetheart. That's strength. My father appeared from his study, and the relief on his face made my throat tight. There's my girl, he said softly. I went to him, and he wrapped me in a hug that felt like safety, like home, like everything I'd been missing without knowing it. Did they hurt you? He asked quietly. Not physically. His jaw tightened. Sometimes that's worse. We sat in the living room, the same room where I told them I wanted to leave 5 years ago, and I told them everything. The humiliation, the constant criticism, Noah's betrayal, the dinner party that had finally broken me. My father listened with the kind of focused attention that made powerful people nervous. My mother held my hand, squeezing gently every time my voice broke. When I finished, the silence felt heavy with unspoken things. What do you want to do? My father asked finally. I don't know, I admitted. I don't want revenge. I don't want to hurt them. I just want to walk away with your dignity, he finished. Yes, he smiled faintly. Then let's help you do that properly. I didn't yet know what that meant. Chapter 7. The first week back home I did nothing but exist. I slept in my childhood bed, ate my mother's cooking, and let myself remember what it felt like to be somewhere I didn't have to perform. No etiquette lessons. No approved outfits. No carefully monitored conversations. Just peace. My parents didn't push. Didn't ask about Noah or the marriage or what came next. They just let me heal at my own pace. On day 8, I finally ventured out of the penthouse. My mother suggested a walk through the city, and I agreed, grateful for the distraction. We ended up at a small cafe I remembered from childhood. Nothing fancy, just good coffee and honest food. The kind of place the Whitlocks would never be caught dead in. You know, my mother said over cappuccinos, your father and I stayed silent all these years because you asked us to. But watching you suffer nearly killed us. I know. I'm sorry. Stop apologizing, she said gently. You're allowed to try things and have them not work out. That's called living. It feels like failing. Only if you measure success by staying in situations that destroy you. She reached across the table, taking my hand. Walking away when you're being mistreated isn't failure, Arya. It's self-respect. I thought about that for a long time. About how I'd equated leaving with weakness, staying with strength. How backward that was. The Whitlocks thought I was nobody, I said quietly. Some girl from nowhere who got lucky. And I let them think that. I could have told them who I really was, but I wanted Noah to love me for me, not for what my family could give him. My mother nodded. That's admirable. But at some point, hiding who you are becomes denying who you are. And you are Sebastian Lane's daughter. You come from strength and grace and power that they couldn't comprehend. I don't want to use that power to hurt them. Then don't, she said simply. But don't let them hurt you anymore either. That afternoon we went to my father's office. I'd been there before years ago, but I'd forgotten how impressive it was. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay. Walls lined with awards and photographs of him with world leaders, tech giants, philanthropists who shaped global policy. This was my legacy. The one I'd walked away from to work in a bookstore and fall for a boy who'd promised forever. My father was on a conference call when we arrived, but he wrapped it up quickly when he saw us. "Aria," he said, smiling. "I was hoping you'd stop by. Mom kidnapped me." He laughed. "She's good at that." His expression grew serious. "How are you feeling?" "Better. Stronger." Pause. "Ready to figure out what comes next?" He gestured to the chairs across from his desk. We sat, and he studied me with those sharp eyes that missed nothing. "What do you want, sweetheart?" he asked. "Not what you think you should want. What do you actually want?" I considered that. Really considered it. "I want to start over," I said finally. "I want to do work that matters. I want to build something meaningful." I met his eyes. "And I want the Whitlocks to understand they didn't break me." "They didn't even crack you," my mother said firmly. My father leaned back in his chair, a small smile playing at his lips. "Your mother and I have been discussing something. A foundation we've wanted to launch for years but never had the right person to lead it." "What kind of foundation?" "Women's education and empowerment. Scholarships for women from disadvantaged backgrounds. Mentorship programs. Job placement. The kind of comprehensive support that changes lives." My heart started beating faster. "That sounds incredible. We'd want you to run it," he said. "If you're interested." "Me? You've spent the last 5 years living among ordinary people, understanding their struggles, seeing what they need. You're not disconnected from reality like so many people in our world." He paused. "And you've just survived something that would have destroyed most people. That's exactly the kind of strength these women need to see." I felt tears prick my eyes. "I'd love to." My mother squeezed my hand. "Then consider it done." We spent the rest of the afternoon discussing details. Budget, mission statement, organizational structure. My father already had office space available. My mother had connections to universities and community organizations. If you've ever gotten a second chance when you thought everything was over, leave a comment. 'Cause that's what this felt like. 2 weeks later, the foundation was official. The Lane Foundation for Women's Empowerment. My name, my real name, on the letterhead for the first time in 5 years. I threw myself into the work with everything I had. Hiring staff, developing programs, reaching out to potential scholarship recipients. Felt good. Felt right. It felt like I was finally becoming who I was supposed to be all along. But in the quiet moments, I still thought about Noah. About the life we'd built and destroyed. About whether he was okay, whether he missed me, whether he'd finally stood up to his mother. I hadn't heard from him since I left. No calls, no texts, no attempts to reach out. Part of me was relieved. Part of me was heartbroken all over again. Then, one evening a month after I'd walked out, my father called me into his study. "There's something you should know," he said. His expression carefully neutral. "What?" "The Whitlock family is experiencing some difficulties." My stomach dropped. "What kind of difficulties?" He handed me his tablet. A news article was pulled up. "Whitlock Industries under investigation for tax fraud." I stared at the headline, feeling cold. "Did you?" "I made some calls," he said carefully. "Asked some questions. Suggested that certain people look into certain things." He met my eyes. "But I didn't manufacture anything, Aria. The fraud was real. I just made sure the right people knew about it." "Dad. They tried to destroy my daughter," he said, and there was steel in his voice I rarely heard. "Did you think I'd let that go unanswered?" I should have been angry. Should have told him I didn't want revenge, didn't want to stoop to their level. But I wasn't angry. I was tired. And maybe, just maybe, a little bit satisfied that the universe had found its own balance. "What else?" I asked because I could see there was more.
Their primary investor pulled out. Apparently, someone shared concerns about the family's stability and ethics. He paused. Their charity accounts were frozen pending an audit. Several of their board members resigned. All because you made phone calls. All because they built their empire on a foundation of lies and manipulation, he corrected. I just pointed the right people toward the truth. I sat down heavily. Noah must be devastated. He should have thought about that before he let his mother humiliate you. Fair point. Is there more? Yes. The investigation is ongoing. It's likely they'll face significant fines, possibly criminal charges depending on what they find. He studied my face. If you want me to stop, I will. This is about protecting you, not destroying them. I thought about that dinner party. About Vivian's cruel smile and Noah's cowardly silence. About 3 months of being torn apart and rebuilt wrong. Don't stop, I said quietly. But don't go out of your way to make it worse either. Let the truth do what it's supposed to do. He nodded, satisfied. Justice, not vengeance. Exactly. That night, I stood on the penthouse balcony, looking out over the city lights, and thought about karma. How it worked slowly, quietly, rearranging the world until everything found its proper place. I hadn't lifted a finger against the Whitlocks. Hadn't planned their downfall or celebrated their struggles. But I hadn't stopped it either. And maybe that was enough. Then the call came that I both expected and dreaded. Chapter 8. Noah's name lit up my phone screen at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday night. I stared at it for 3 rings, heart hammering, before I finally answered. Aria. His voice was wrecked, raw with emotion I couldn't quite identify. I need to see you. I don't think that's a good idea. Please. Everything's falling apart. The company, my family, I need to talk to you. There was silence where he probably expected me to cave, to agree immediately like I always had before. What do you want, Noah? Asked finally. I want to see my wife. Your wife left 2 months ago. You never came after her. I was trying to give you space. Trying to figure out how to fix everything. And did you? Figure it out. More silence. Then. I didn't know about your family. Your real family. The Lane family. There it was. The real reason for his call. Does it matter? Yes. Of course it matters. If I'd known. If you'd known I came from money and power, you would have what? Treated me better. Defended me to your mother. Actually acted like you loved me. That's not fair. No, I agreed. What's not fair is realizing your husband only cares about you once he learns your net worth. Aria, that's not, I didn't mean. What did you mean, Noah? Because from where I'm standing, you didn't give a damn about me when you thought I was nobody. But now that you know who my father is, suddenly you need to talk. He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was smaller. Everything's falling apart. The business, the investigation, Mom's reputation is destroyed. We're going to lose everything. And you think I can fix it? I think your family could make some calls. Pull some strings. Dad says one word from Sebastian Lane could. I laughed. Actually laughed, bitter and sharp. You want me to ask my father to save the family that spent 3 months destroying me? We made mistakes. You made choices, I corrected. Every single time your mother tore me down and you said nothing, that was a choice. Every time you prioritized her opinion over my feelings, that was a choice. Don't call them mistakes like they were accidents. I know I was wrong, he said, and now there were tears in his voice. I know I failed you. But we're married, Aria. Doesn't that mean anything anymore? It meant everything, I whispered. Until you showed me it didn't mean enough. So what, you're just done? You're going to let my family fall because of my mistakes? I'm not letting anything happen, Noah. I'm just not stopping it. Took a breath. Your family built themselves on manipulation and lies. The investigation. The financial problems. That's karma, not me. Your father. My father protected his daughter, I interrupted. The way you should have protected your wife. The line went quiet except for his ragged breathing. I loved you, he said finally. I still do. Those words should have melted me. Should have made me want to run back, fix everything, save him like I'd always tried to save him before. But they didn't. Because I finally understood something crucial. Then you should have loved me when I had nothing, I said softly. When I was just Aria from the bookstore with no connections and no pedigree. That's when I needed you to love me. Not now when you think I can save you. Aria. I hope you figure things out, I said, and I meant it. I hope your family survives this and learns something from it. But I can't be part of that process. I can't fix you, Noah. I tried for 3 months and it almost broke me. So that's it. We're done. I thought about the girl who'd said yes on that beach at sunset. About how much she'd believed in forever. About how naive she'd been. We've been done for a while, I said gently. We just didn't admit it until now. I'll fight for you, he said desperately. I'll leave my family, move to San Francisco, do whatever it takes to. Don't, I interrupted. Don't make promises you'll break the moment your mother asks you to. We both know how this ends. He was crying now, openly, and part of me, the part that remembered who he used to be, ached for him. But I was done setting myself on fire to keep other people warm. Goodbye, Noah, I said. Wait. I ended the call before he could finish. Then I blocked his number, deleted our text thread, and sat there on my bed feeling lighter than I had in months. It was over. Really, truly over. No more hoping he'd change. No more waiting for him to choose me. No more shrinking myself to fit into his world. I was free. If you've ever had to let go of someone you still cared about because you finally cared about yourself more, you understand what I felt in that moment. My mother found me 20 minutes later, still sitting on my bed, staring at my phone. Noah called, I said. She sat beside me. And he wanted me to ask Dad to save his family from the investigation. She made a disgusted sound. The audacity. I told him no. I told him we're done. How do you feel? I considered that. Sad, relieved, angry, free. All of it at once. She pulled me into a hug. That sounds about right. Is it wrong that I'm not devastated? It's healthy, she corrected. You mourned that marriage while you were still in it. This is just making it official. She was right. I'd grieved Noah for months. Every night he chose his mother over me. Every time he looked through me instead of at me. Every moment that proved our marriage was already over. This was just the final paperwork. Over the next few weeks, news of the Whitlock family's troubles spread through their social circle like wildfire. Articles appeared in business journals. Whispers became conversations. Their pristine reputation crumbled like a house built on sand. And I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not guilt. Just a quiet certainty that the universe had corrected itself. I focused on the foundation instead. We awarded our first scholarships to 15 women. Single mothers, immigrants, women rebuilding after trauma. Women who reminded me of myself in different ways. At the award ceremony I gave a speech. Talked about resilience and starting over and remembering your worth when the world tries to make you forget it. Someone once tried to make me believe I was nobody, I said, looking out at the crowd. That I had no past worth mentioning, no value beyond what they decided to give me. And for a while, I almost believed them. Pause. But the truth is, we're all somebody. We all have worth that exists whether others recognize it or not. And sometimes, the greatest act of power is simply refusing to disappear. The applause was thunderous. After the ceremony, women approached me with their stories. Similar humiliations, similar awakenings, similar journeys back to themselves. I realized something then. My story wasn't special. It was universal. How many women had been made small by people who claimed to love them? How many had forgotten themselves trying to be acceptable to others? Too many. Way too many. That night, I went home to the penthouse and stood on the balcony, looking out over the city that had always been mine, and felt something shift inside me. I wasn't the same girl who'd left here 5 years ago, chasing ordinary love and simple happiness. But I wasn't the woman the Whitlocks had tried to make me either. I was somewhere in between, wiser, harder, but not broken. Never broken. My phone buzzed. An email from my lawyer. Divorce papers, ready for my signature. I'd expected them to hurt more. Expected some rush of grief or regret. But all I felt was ready. I signed them that night, electronically, no ceremony or drama. Just my name on a line that ended one chapter so another could begin. And when it was done, I whispered to the city lights. Sometimes the greatest revenge is living with peace they can't touch. The line went silent, and for the first time in years I felt light. Chapter 9. The divorce was finalized on a Thursday afternoon in October, exactly 4 months after I'd walked out of that mansion. My lawyer called to confirm the judge had signed off on everything. "You're officially free," she said like it was good news. And it was. It really was. But freedom is complicated. Doesn't always feel like victory. Sometimes it just feels like survival. I was at the foundation office when the call came, surrounded by grant applications and program proposals. Work that mattered, work that helped people, work that made me feel like I was doing something real with my life. "How are you celebrating?" asked my assistant Marco when I told him. "I don't know if celebrating is the right word. Boss, you just escaped a situation that was killing you slowly. That deserves champagne at minimum." He wasn't wrong. That evening, my parents took me to dinner at our favorite restaurant. Nothing fancy, just good food and honest company. The kind of place where nobody cared about your last name or your social standing. "To new beginnings," my father said, raising his glass. "To remembering who you are," my mother added. "To surviving," I said quietly. We clinked glasses and drank, and I felt something loosen in my chest that had been tight for so long I'd forgotten what breathing freely felt like. "Have you heard anything about them?" my mother asked carefully, and I knew she meant the Whitlocks. Not directly. But I read the articles. The investigation had concluded with substantial fines and mandatory restructuring. No criminal charges, but enough damage that their reputation might never recover. Vivian had withdrawn from public life entirely. Noah had taken over day-to-day operations of what was left of the business. Part of me felt bad for them. Very small part. Most of me just felt relieved that chapter was closed. What's next for you? My father asked. More of this, I said, gesturing vaguely toward the direction of the foundation office. Building something that matters. Helping women who've been where I've been. And personally, my mother pressed gently. Personally, I laughed. I think I need to remember how to be just Arya for a while. Not someone's wife, not someone's disappointment, just me. That sounds perfect, she said, smiling. 3 weeks after the divorce, I attended a fundraising gala for another charitable organization. My first major social event since leaving Noah, and I'd be lying if I said I wasn't nervous. But I walked in wearing a dress I'd chosen, with my real name on my chest instead of hiding it, and nobody whispered about my mysterious past or questioned my worth. 'Cause they knew who I was. Sebastian Lane's daughter. Catherine Lane's daughter. Arya Lane, director of a foundation that was already changing lives. That's where I met Landon. He was talking to a small group near the bar, gesturing animatedly about something. Tall, kind face, smile that reached his eyes. Not polished like Noah had been, rough around the edges in ways that felt honest. Our eyes met across the room, and he did something surprising. He smiled, then went back to his conversation. No immediate approach. No smooth pickup line. Just acknowledgement and then space. I found that more attractive than any grand gesture. Later in the evening, we ended up at the same table during dinner. He introduced himself simply. Landon Cross. Humanitarian investor, professional optimist. Arya Lane. Foundation director, recovering cynic. He laughed, genuine and warm. Recovering is the important word there. We talked through dinner about his work. Sustainable development projects in underserved communities, microfinance programs, clean water initiatives. He asked about the foundation with real interest, not the polite questions people ask when they're just being social. I read about you, he admitted. About what you're building. It's impressive work. You read about me. I raised an eyebrow. I research everyone I'm interested in working with, he said, then caught himself. That sounded creepy. I mean, I thought our organizations might have synergy. Overlapping missions. Is that what you're calling it? He grinned, caught. Okay, fine. I also read about you because someone pointed you out when you walked in and said you were Sebastian Lane's daughter. And I was curious how someone from that kind of privilege ended up running a grassroots foundation. And what did you conclude? That there's probably a good story there. There is, I said. Not all of it is mine to tell yet. Fair enough. He didn't push, didn't pry, just accepted that boundary like it was the most natural thing in the world. We talked until the gala ended. Then stood in the parking lot for another hour, conversation flowing like we'd known each other for years instead of hours. Can I take you to coffee? He asked finally. Not a date, he added quickly. Just coffee. To discuss potential collaboration between our organizations. That's your story and you're sticking to it. Unless you want it to be a date, in which case I'll pivot seamlessly. I laughed, surprising myself. Coffee sounds good. Just coffee. Just coffee, he agreed. But there was something in his smile that said he hoped it might become more eventually. And maybe, eventually, I hoped that too. Over the next few months, just coffee turned into regular lunch meetings, turned into actual dates, turned into something that felt remarkably like healing. Landon was different from Noah in every way that mattered. He asked about my day and actually listened. He shared his struggles instead of pretending to be perfect. When I talked about the foundation, he offered genuine support instead of suggestions on how to make it more appropriate. Most importantly, he never once asked me to be anything other than exactly who I was. Tell me about your ex-husband, he said one evening, 6 months into whatever we were building. We were walking along the waterfront, city lights reflecting on the bay, and the question caught me off guard. Why do you want to know? Because he's obviously part of your story, and I want to understand all of you, not just the parts that are easy. So I told him. About Noah, about the Whitlocks, about losing myself and finding myself again. About that dinner party and walking away and the complicated grief of leaving someone you once loved. He listened without interrupting, without offering solutions, just being present with my story. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, he was an idiot. I laughed, surprised. That's your analysis. He had you, someone brilliant and strong and real, and he tried to turn you into something small and manageable. Idiot is the nicest word I've got for that. It's more complicated than. I know it's complicated, he interrupted gently. I know you still care. About him in some ways, that there's grief mixed with relief, that healing isn't linear. But from where I'm standing, any man who had you and didn't fight to keep you exactly as you are made the biggest mistake of his life. I stopped walking, turning to face him. Landon, I'm not saying that to make a move, he said quickly. I'm saying it because it's true. And because I want you to know that when I look at you, I don't see someone who needs fixing or refining or improving. I see someone who's already extraordinary.
My throat tightened. You barely know me. Then let me know you better, he said simply. No pressure, no expectations. Just let me know the real Arya, whoever she is today, whoever she's becoming tomorrow. And that's when I realized something crucial. Noah had loved the version of me he wanted me to become. Landon was interested in whoever I actually was. That difference changed everything. Okay, I whispered. Okay, let's see where this goes. His smile could have lit the entire waterfront. That's the best thing I've heard all month. We took it slow. Painfully, deliberately slow. 'Cause I needed slow. Needed to rebuild trust in my own judgment. Needed to believe someone could love me without wanting to reshape me first. Landon was patient. He didn't push for labels or commitments or promises about the future. He just showed up, for coffee dates and foundation events and quiet evenings watching bad movies on my couch. He met my parents 4 months in and I was terrified. My father had strong opinions about the men in my life. And after Noah, those opinions had gotten even stronger. But Landon handled it beautifully. He didn't try to impress my father with business talk or connections. He just asked genuine questions and listened to the answers and treated my mother like the remarkable woman she was. I like him, my father said after Landon left. High praise from a man who'd watched his daughter get destroyed by her last relationship. Me too, I admitted. He's not intimidated by who you are. No, I agreed. He seems to actually like who I am. My mother smiled. That's how it should be. Meanwhile, life moved forward. The foundation grew, serving more women, creating more opportunities, changing more lives. I became someone people recognized. Not as Sebastian Lane's daughter or Noah Whitlock's ex-wife, but as Arya Lane, someone doing meaningful work. I published articles about empowerment and resilience. Spoke at conferences about rebuilding after trauma. Became the kind of woman I'd needed to see when I was drowning in that mansion. And through it all, Landon was there. Not hovering, not managing, just supporting. Celebrating victories and steadying me through setbacks and making me laugh when I took myself too seriously. One evening, 8 months after that first gala, we were back on the waterfront. Same spot where I'd told him about Noah, where I'd agreed to let him know me better. I've been thinking, Landon said, hands in his pockets, looking out at the water. Dangerous hobby. He smiled. About us. About what we are, what we're becoming. My heart started beating faster. And I don't care where you came from or what mistakes you've made or how broken you think you might be. He turned to face me. I care about where you're going. I care about who you are right now, in this moment. I care about building something with you that's based on truth instead of performance. Landon, I'm not asking you to marry me, he said quickly. I'm not even asking you to call me your boyfriend if that word still feels heavy. I'm just asking you to believe that this, us, can be different from what you had before. Thought about Noah. About how he'd loved me until it became inconvenient. About how his love had been conditional on my compliance. Then I thought about Landon. About how he'd never once asked me to be smaller, quieter, more palatable. How he celebrated my strength instead of being threatened by it. I believe it, I said finally. I believe you. Yeah. I reached for his hand. And for the record, you can call yourself my boyfriend. I think I'm ready for that. His grin was incandescent. Best day of my life. It's just a label. It's not just anything, he corrected, pulling me closer. It's you trusting me enough to try again. That's everything. He kissed me then, soft and sure, and it felt nothing like kissing Noah had felt. Not because it was better or worse, just different. Real in a way that didn't require pretending. When we pulled apart, I rested my forehead against his. I'm still figuring myself out, I warned. I'm still healing from everything that happened. Good, he said. Figure it out. I'll be right here while you do. And he was. Through foundation crises and family complications and days when the grief of my failed marriage hit me out of nowhere. He was steady when I needed steady and gave me space when I needed space and never once made me feel like my healing was an inconvenience. That's when I knew. Not that he was perfect, nobody is, but that he was real. That what we were building was based on mutual respect and genuine affection instead of performance and pretense. 6 months after that waterfront conversation, we were attending another gala. Same venue where we'd met, different cause. I was giving a speech about the foundation's impact, feeling confident in ways I'd forgotten were possible. And that's when I saw him. Noah, standing near the back of the room, watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Our eyes met across the crowd, and everything stopped for a moment. All the history, all the pain, all the what-ifs crystallized into a single recognition. We were different people now. Both of us had changed in the year since I'd left. After my speech, he approached carefully. "Arya, you look well." "Thank you." "So do you." Awkward silence. Then, "I read about your foundation. What you're doing, it's impressive." "I appreciate that." "I wanted to apologize," he said, words tumbling out like he'd been practicing. "For everything. For how I treated you, for how my family treated you, for not being the man you deserved." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw genuine regret. Not the desperate pleading from his phone call a year ago, but actual understanding of what he'd done wrong. "I appreciate the apology," I said carefully. "That means something. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that losing you taught me things I should have learned before I married you." He glanced around. "My family's recovering. Slowly. Mom's in therapy, believe it or not." "That's good. I'm glad." "Are you happy?" he asked suddenly. I thought about my life, the foundation, my family, Landon waiting patiently across the room, giving me space to handle this moment. "Yeah," I said honestly. "I really am." Something flickered in his expression. Relief maybe. Or closure. "You deserve that. You always did." Landon appeared at my side then. Not possessive but present. "Everything okay?" "Fine," I said, smiling up at him. Then to Noah. "This is Landon. My boyfriend." Noah extended his hand. "Nice to meet you. Take care of her." "I plan to," Landon said simply. They shook hands and just like that the chapter closed. No drama, no confrontation, just two people who'd hurt each other acknowledging that they'd both moved on. As Noah walked away, I felt Landon's hand on my lower back. "You all right?" "Better than all right," I said. That felt like closing a door I didn't realize was still open. Good doors to close. "Better than all right," I said. That felt like closing a door I didn't realize was still open. Good doors to close. The best kind. We left the gala hand in hand, and I realized something profound. I'd spent so much energy being angry at Noah, at what he'd done, at what his family had taken from me. But they hadn't taken anything I hadn't been willing to give. And the moment I'd stopped giving it, the moment I'd chosen myself, everything had changed. That was the real revenge. Not my father's phone calls or their business troubles or their damaged reputation. It was me thriving. It was me happy. It was me, building a life that fulfilled me instead of one that met someone else's expectations. The call that didn't change anything became the moment that freed everything.
Chapter 10. 2 years after walking out of that mansion, I stood in front of a mirror in a completely different kind of dress. Not a wedding dress. I wasn't quite ready for that again, and Landon understood. But a beautiful gown for the Foundation's annual gala, the one that had become the social event of the season for all the right reasons. "You look incredible," my mother said, adjusting my necklace. "I feel incredible," I admitted. "Is that allowed?" "It's required." She smiled. "You've earned this, sweetheart. Everything you've built, everything you've become, you did that yourself." The gala was packed. 500 guests instead of 75. Politicians and philanthropists and business leaders, but also scholarship recipients and program participants and women whose lives had been changed by the work we were doing. This was what success looked like when you built it on truth instead of pretense. Landon found me before the speeches began. Handsome in his tuxedo, smile warm and genuine. Ready to change some more lives. Always. We'd announced tonight that we were merging our organizations, creating something even bigger and more impactful. A partnership built on shared vision and mutual respect. The kind of collaboration that actually worked because neither of us needed to be in charge, we just needed to do good work. Kind of like our relationship, actually. "I have something to tell you," he said as we waited backstage. "Now. Right before I go on. It can't wait." He took both my hands. "I love you." My breath caught. We'd been dancing around those words for months, both of us knowing they were true but neither quite ready to say them out loud. I love you too, I whispered. I know you're not ready for marriage again. I know you need time, maybe a lot of time, and that's okay. But I wanted you to know before you go out there and inspire 500 people that you've already inspired me. Every single day. Tears pricked my eyes. You're going to ruin my makeup. Sorry. He wasn't sorry at all. No, you're not. Not even a little bit. He kissed my forehead gently. Now go change the world. I'll be right here when you're done. I walked onto that stage with confidence that came from knowing exactly who I was. Not Sebastian Lane's daughter. Not Noah Whitlock's ex-wife. Not anyone's project or anyone's disappointment. Just Aria. Building something meaningful. Helping people who needed help. Living with purpose instead of performance. Thank you all for being here tonight, I began, looking out at the sea of faces. 2 years ago I was lost. I'd forgotten who I was, trying to be someone I wasn't. I'd traded my identity for acceptance, my voice for approval, my strength for the illusion of security. The room was silent, listening. Then I made a choice. Chose myself. I chose honesty over harmony. I chose self-respect over other people's comfort. And I chose to believe that walking away from what was killing me wasn't failure. It was survival. I saw heads nodding. Women dabbing at their eyes. People recognizing their own stories in mine. This foundation exists because of that choice. Because I learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to disappear. Refuse to shrink. Refuse to apologize for taking up space in your own life. Thunderous applause. I waited for it to quiet. We've awarded scholarships to 300 women. Placed 400 in meaningful jobs. Provided mentorship to thousands more. But the work we're most proud of. Teaching women that their worth isn't determined by who accepts them. It's determined by who they choose to be when the world tries to make them forget. More applause. I caught Landon's eye in the wings. He was beaming. Tonight, I'm announcing a partnership with Cross Global Initiatives. Together, we're expanding our reach, deepening our impact, and proving that when people build things on truth instead of ego, incredible things happen. The rest of the evening was a blur of congratulations and conversations, and women thanking me through tears for giving voice to their experiences. It was humbling and overwhelming and absolutely perfect. Late that night, after the last guest had left and the venue was being cleaned, Landon and I stood on the balcony overlooking the city. You were amazing tonight, he said. We were amazing, I corrected. This is ours now. Both of ours. I like the sound of that. We stood in comfortable silence, watching lights twinkle across the bay. This city had always been mine, but now it felt different. Not like a place I'd run to, but a place I'd chosen. Do you ever think about him? Landon asked quietly. Noah. Sometimes, I admitted. But not the way I used to. Now it's more like thinking about a book I read once. It shaped me, taught me things, but I've moved on to other. That's healthy. I'm working on healthy. I leaned into him. With your help. You're doing all the work. I'm just showing up. Showing up is everything, I said, and I meant it. If you found someone who shows up for who you actually are instead of who they wish you'd be, drop a comment. Because that's the kind of love worth waiting for. My phone buzzed. A text from my father. Proud of you, sweetheart. Your mother's crying. In a good way. I smiled, texting back a heart emoji. Your parents? Landon asked. Yeah. They're proud. They should be. What you've built, what we're building now, it matters. It does, I agreed. But you know what matters more. What? That I'm happy. Really genuinely happy. Not performing happiness for someone else's benefit, but actually feeling it. He pulled me closer. That's all I've ever wanted for you. I know. That's why I love you. We stayed there until the city lights started dimming with approaching dawn. Talking about plans for the foundation, about travel we wanted to do, about the future we were building together with patience and honesty. No grand gestures. No dramatic declarations. Just two people who'd both been broken in different ways, choosing to heal together instead of hiding their scars. Months turned into years. The foundation grew. Our partnership, personal and professional, deepened. I wrote a book about my experience about losing yourself and finding your way back, and it became a bestseller that helped thousands of women recognize their own worth. My parents grew older, softer, prouder. They'd given me space to make my own mistakes and had been there to help me heal from them without saying, "I told you so." And Noah, I heard through mutual acquaintances that he'd left California, started fresh somewhere else, finally stepping out from under his mother's shadow. I hoped he was happy. I hoped he'd learned the lessons our marriage had tried to teach us both. Mostly I just stopped thinking about him at all. Because my life wasn't about him anymore. Wasn't defined by that chapter or shaped by that pain. It was about everything I'd built after. The foundation, the women we'd helped, the love I'd found with someone who celebrated my strength instead of fearing it. 3 years after that first gala where Landon and I met, he proposed. Nothing fancy. Just us on that same waterfront where so much of our story had unfolded, with city lights reflecting on the water and his voice steady with certainty. "I don't need to change you," he said, ring box open. "I don't want to fix you or improve you or make you fit some image in my head. I just want to keep showing up for whoever you are, whoever you're becoming for the rest of our lives." Said yes. Not because I needed marriage to feel complete, but because I wanted to choose him the way he'd chosen me. Fully, honestly, without conditions. We got married in a small ceremony with just family and close friends. No vineyard, no 500 guests, no performance. Just truth and love and two people who'd both survived their own kinds of devastation and had decided to build something better together. And when people asked me years later, after the foundation had helped thousands, after my book had reached millions, after I'd become someone known for empowerment instead of my famous last name, when they asked what had changed me, what had made the difference, I'd smile and tell them the truth. I remembered who I was when someone tried to make me forget. And then I chose to become everything they said I couldn't be, without ever lowering myself to their level. That was the real revenge. Not destruction but creation. Not bitterness but peace. Not proving I was better than them, but proving to myself that I was exactly enough just as I was. Sometimes the greatest revenge is living well. Not because you're trying to make anyone jealous, but because you finally stopped asking permission to take up space in your own life. The Whitlocks had tried to break me. Instead, they'd helped me discover who I really was beneath all the pretense and people-pleasing. And for that, though I'd never say it out loud, I was almost grateful. Because the woman I became after leaving them was stronger, wiser, and infinitely more herself than the girl who'd walked down that aisle in white lace, believing love meant sacrifice instead of partnership. In the end, my story wasn't about revenge or wealth or proving anyone wrong. It was about balance. About the universe rearranging itself until truth won over pretense, until strength was celebrated instead of punished, until love meant, "I see you," instead of "I'll fix you." And as I stood hand in hand with Landon beneath the soft glow of city lights, in a life I'd built with purpose, surrounded by people who loved me for exactly who I was, I whispered to myself one more time. Sometimes the greatest revenge is becoming everything they said you couldn't be, without ever lowering yourself to their level. The camera would fade there. My silhouette framed against the skyline. A symbol of quiet power, love reborn, and the unbreakable dignity of a woman who chose grace over bitterness. Perfect. Thank you so much for watching Aria's journey from humiliation to empowerment, from losing herself to finding her true strength. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to choose yourself over someone else's expectations, if you've ever walked away from what was killing you to find what would heal you, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We have more incredible stories of resilience, redemption, and the quiet power of refusing to disappear coming your way. Drop a comment sharing your own story of choosing yourself. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Share this video with someone who needs the reminder that walking away isn't giving up, it's waking up. Until next time, remember, you don't need anyone's permission to take up space in your own life. Your worth isn't determined by who accepts you. It's determined by who you choose to be when the world tries to make you forget. Stay strong. Stay true. And never ever shrink yourself for someone else's comfort. See you in the next story.